They called them mistakes, not because of who they were, but because of where they came from. Mistakes don't know how to love themselves, not until someone chooses to love them first. This story begins under harsh fluorescent lights, in the quietest hour of the night, when a man who had already lost everything walked into a room filled with cries he never expected to answer. Jordan Rivers was 34, a licensed trauma psychologist, a white gay man, quiet and thoughtful, known among colleagues for his calm tone and precise words. But no one knew what his silence had cost. Just 6 months earlier, Jordan had buried the man he called his soulmate, a gentle graphic novelist who lost his fight with cancer. Since then, Jordan moved through life like an echo present, but fading. It was a slow night in the ER. The maternity wing smelled of antiseptic and freshly printed discharge forms. Jordan wasn't scheduled to be there. He was covering for a friend on leave. He expected nothing more than late paperwork and routine consults. Until 3:47 a.m., when a nurse burst through the double doors, out of breath, whispering that something unusual had happened. Room 312 was silent, except for the soft coos of 4 newborns, swaddled in identical white hospital blankets. A nurse adjusted their bassinets, placing them side by side as if they belonged to one single breath. There was no mother in sight, just a crumpled piece of paper taped to the metal crib. "They'll be better off if I disappear." No names, no emergency contact, just 4 perfect babies with no one waiting for them. Jordan stood frozen, hand resting on the glass. Something cracked open inside him, sharp and familiar. He saw his own 10-year-old self again, bag of clothes in hand, door slamming behind him, his father's voice echoing, "There's no place for that filth in my house." He remembered the shelters, the years in foster care, the hollow birthdays and the silence that followed every question that started with why. The system didn't wait long. By morning, child services began paperwork to split the babies among different homes. The official reasoning, no single foster home had the capacity or financial clearance to take all 4. Jordan listened in a daze, heart pounding louder with each bureaucratic phrase. Sibling separation was common, efficient, necessary, they said. But he knew the scars that separation left behind. He had lived them. Something in him refused to stay quiet. At 10:12 a.m., Jordan submitted an urgent petition to act as temporary guardian just for 6 months. Long enough, he told himself, to keep them together. The administrator hesitated. Jordan was recently widowed. He lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment. His university funding for research had just been pulled. He didn't even have 4 car seats. But he had one thing: resolve. The kind that comes from surviving. The kind that turns loss into purpose. The kind that doesn't ask if something is convenient, only if it's right. By evening, he walked into a rental car with 4 hospital discharge forms, 4 tiny hats, and a heart heavier than he'd carried in years. He was no longer just grieving. He was becoming a stranger who dared to believe love could be chosen, not inherited. That family could begin in a whisper, in the space between fear and faith. That sometimes, the most sacred things in life aren't planned, they're left behind by someone too broken to carry them. And in those moments, it's not the bloodline that matters, it's the hand that reaches back. Stay with us to see what happens next. This is Heart Story, where the most powerful families are the ones we choose. And sometimes, the mistake the world tried to erase becomes the very thing that teaches us how to love again. The move didn't happen with a truck or a grand plan, just with 1 suitcase, 4 borrowed cribs, and a box of secondhand baby clothes stacked next to a bag of powdered formula. Jordan left his 1-bedroom apartment behind and signed a lease on a small rental house at the edge of town. It wasn't much peeling wallpaper, creaky floors, and a backyard fenced in with rusted wire, but it had space. Space for breathing, space for healing, space for 4 new lives who had never known what it meant to be wanted. Levi, River, Theo, and Noah weren't just babies. They were a symphony, even in sleep. They turned toward each other, their tiny faces drawn together like compass points seeking home. When one cried, the others quieted. When one kicked in the crib, another reached out a hand without opening his eyes. Jordan had read every foster manual he could find. But no chapter prepared him for this: 4 infants connected in a way that felt more like instinct than coincidence. There were no lullabies in those first weeks. Only long nights of bottles and burp cloths, of diaper changes done by flashlight during power outages, of crying that blurred into morning and still didn't stop. Jordan didn't know how to be a father. He only knew how not to abandon, so he watched closely. He learned that Theo calmed when the wind chimes rang outside, that River only drank if held heart to heart, that Levi hated the scent of almond lotion, that Noah fell asleep only when cradled with a heartbeat against his cheek. His own grief softened in those moments, not gone, but somehow quieter. He used every cent from his savings, canceling gym memberships and deferring student loans. He sold his old desk, the one where he used to write reports beside his partner's drawings. That desk paid for a month of baby wipes and infant Tylenol. A crib arrived, chipped. He fixed it with wood glue and whispered, "We don't need perfect, just safe." The state assigned a young social worker named Miss Hart to assess his household. She was polite, careful, but not impressed. Her clipboard held numbers, and Jordan's life didn't add up. No partner, no traditional income, recently bereaved. And above all, he was a gay man asking to raise 4 babies alone in a rented home with a cracked driveway. She returned a week later with a formal suggestion: choose 2. The system could support that. It was reasonable, manageable. Jordan listened silently, then placed the paperwork back into her hand. "These boys aren't a package to be split," he said, voice low. "They're not files or case numbers. They're brothers. They've already lost their birth mother. I won't let them lose each other too." Miss Hart hesitated. Her expression didn't soften, but something in her silence changed. She didn't press the issue again. Jordan wasn't fighting for attention. He wasn't filming a moment to share online. He simply refused to become another adult who walked away. He remembered the sting of being told you're too much. He wouldn't let these children be told the same. There were days when exhaustion sank into his bones, when he caught himself nodding off mid-feeding, forehead pressed to the side of a crib. But each time he questioned himself, one of the boys would reach out a tiny hand and curl it around his finger, as if reminding him, "We're still here. We're still together." Jordan began to understand something essential: parenthood isn't earned through biology or legal status. It's carved slowly, through 1,000 acts of staying, through showing up when no one else does, through choosing someone, again and again, even when it costs you everything. And the truth is, love doesn't always roar in triumph. Sometimes it whispers in the dark. You are not alone. Especially when 4 little voices are learning to say one word they've never heard before: Dad. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon, just a short video Jordan captured while sitting cross-legged on the faded rug of the nursery. Levi was balancing blocks on Noah's belly. River was humming with a toy keyboard, and Theo was giggling in the corner, covered in crayon streaks. Jordan added a caption almost absent-mindedly: "We don't share DNA, but we share love." He posted it, then went back to folding laundry. By the next morning, the video had reached over 100,000 views. By evening, it was everywhere, retweeted, remixed, subtitled in other languages. The comments were endless, from queer couples waiting to adopt, from foster kids who had grown up separated from their siblings, from single parents who whispered, "I thought I was alone." But most of all, from strangers who had never seen 4 toddlers held together not by blood, but by choice. The account Daddy with 4 was born not from strategy, but survival. Jordan began documenting the daily rhythm of their life chore charts made with stickers, midnight cuddles after night terrors, impromptu dance-offs in pajamas, quiet moments when all 4 huddled around a picture book about families that didn't look like theirs but felt like home. He never framed it as extraordinary, just real, honest, messy. The platform took notice. An educational initiative reached out, offering a partnership to develop content on emotional intelligence for children. They saw in Jordan something rare: someone teaching through example. Not lecture, through presence, not performance. The income from content allowed them to breathe. With that, Jordan moved the family into a larger home, not grand but warm, with sunlit rooms and a porch swing where the boys watched squirrels chase each other across the fence. He hired a part-time nurse to help with the boys' medical appointments and speech therapy. For the first time since the day he left the hospital with 4 discharge papers, he exhaled without fear. Then, Miss Hart returned. Her demeanor was different now, still professional, but less guarded. She no longer carried a clipboard, just a small folder. She sat at the kitchen table, watching the boys pass snacks to one another, then silently clean up without being told. "We haven't seen a sibling group this bonded in years," she admitted. "They mirror each other's emotions, anticipate each other's needs. It's rare, very rare." Jordan said nothing, only nodded. He knew what she was trying not to say. Despite their progress, despite the love, the growth, the undeniable family they'd built, the system still hesitated. Jordan wasn't married. He had no extended family nearby, no conventional safety net. In their view, that made him vulnerable. A risk. He'd heard those words before. When he came out at 15, when he applied for his first job and was asked if his lifestyle would interfere with work, when he lost research funding and was told the board wasn't comfortable with visibility, risk, unfit, unstable. But what the forms never measured was resilience. The resilience to say no to division, the resilience to choose love over comfort, the resilience to create a home with no map, only intention. Jordan didn't need the world to applaud what he was doing. He only needed the boys to grow up knowing they were never someone's mistake. And in that rented house, with TikTok notifications buzzing in the background and 4 pairs of small feet stomping down the hallway in mismatched socks, he knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the best kind of parenting isn't about knowing everything, it's about showing up, again and again, until trust outweighs fear. And in a world that often celebrates the polished and perfect, there is something sacred about choosing to stay in the mess with your children, long enough for them to realize love didn't just visit, it moved in. It was well past midnight when Jordan's phone rang. The house was still. Outside, the wind tapped gently against the windows. Inside, 4 boys lay asleep in their shared room, breath soft and synchronized, like waves brushing against the same shore. Jordan answered the call quietly, expecting a wrong number or maybe a message from the nurse. Instead, a voice identified itself as a probate attorney. "I believe you're caring for 4 children recently placed in temporary custody," the man asked. "There's something you need to see. It concerns their biological father." Jordan felt his chest tighten. He had never asked about the father. The mother's note was the only documentation, no birth certificate names, no familial contact, just silence. And silence, in his experience, often hid more pain than peace. He met the lawyer the following morning in a quiet office downtown. There was no security, no media, no entourage, just a stack of sealed files and a confidential disclosure. The father of the boys had been a state legislator, a man recently deceased, found lifeless in his home after what was ruled a sudden cardiac event. Married, public-facing, conservative, for years, he had carefully cultivated an image of traditional family values. But long before he'd entered office, he had fathered 4 children during a brief, hidden affair, then vanished from their lives without acknowledgement. There had been no custody battle, no support, only a private bank account and one final act of conscience, a handwritten addendum to his will, signed and notarized but never publicized. It read, "To the 4 children, I never had the courage to claim this fund is yours. I do not deserve forgiveness, but I offer this a scholarship trust of $500,000, divided equally. My silence does not erase you. I only hope, one day, you will find voices that do not fail you." Jordan read the words again and again, not for the money, but for what it revealed. A man paralyzed by fear, a system that rewarded concealment, and 4 children born into the crossfire of personal shame and political performance. The lawyer asked if Jordan wanted to pursue a media release confirmation of the children's lineage. There were outlets that would pay generously for the story. Some would spin it as redemption, others, scandal. Jordan declined. The boys didn't need legacy. They needed privacy. What mattered wasn't the name on their birth records, but the arms that rocked them to sleep. The man who sat beside them during night fevers, who learned to braid Theo's hair with shaky fingers and watched River draw families with 5 smiling stick figures. He left the office with a flash drive and a paper copy of the will, both of which he stored in a locked drawer beneath the crib drawers. No headlines, no press. Back home, Jordan watched as Levi tried to explain fractions to Noah using cookies and crayons. Theo played doctor with River's stuffed animals, declaring one of them had emotional trauma from too many hugs. They were whole in ways the world hadn't prepared for. He wouldn't let that be undone by legacy or gossip. That night, after bedtime, Jordan sat on the porch swing and stared out at the yard, where tricycles lay toppled like memories in progress. He thought about all the children who would never learn the truth of their beginnings, who would be told they were born of sin, or shame, or silence. But in this home, the truth wasn't in DNA. It was in presence, in care, in the decision to stay. And so he held that truth gently, not as a weapon, but as a quiet vow that the past wouldn't define them. That forgiveness, if it ever came, would be chosen on their terms, not inherited through guilt. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a parent can do is protect not just the life a child has, but the story they get to carry into the world. The world didn't shift all at once. It changed in the quiet over decades. Diapers turned to school bags and crayons to test scores, bedtime stories to late-night talks about heartbreak and hope. And Jordan, once a man holding 4 fragile lives in his arms, became something else entirely, a center of gravity for people who no longer needed him to walk, but still turned to him for direction. Levi became a child psychologist. He specialized in trauma among foster children, particularly those who had lost siblings. Patients described him as someone who didn't just listen, but seemed to remember what pain sounded like. His office walls bore no degrees, only drawings from children who left his care believing in safety again. River told stories with a camera, a documentary filmmaker who rejected commercial contracts to create work that exposed what systems try to hide. His first feature, Chosen Love, told the story of 4 brothers raised by a single gay father in defiance of every rulebook. It didn't beg for sympathy. It simply asked the world to look and not turn away. Noah worked in international law. At the United Nations, he drafted protections for LGBTQ+ youth, insisting that family be defined not by bloodlines, but by care and presence. His legal briefings were fierce, but always ended with a quote from the man who raised him: "Love is not fragile. Shame is." Theo chose the stage. A Broadway playwright and performer, he wrote, found a musical about a boy left behind, and the stranger who stayed. It ran for 3 years, toured 6 countries, and was later adapted into a high school curriculum on chosen families. He said he wrote not to entertain, but to make people remember what it feels like to be chosen. Then came the ceremony. Jordan hadn't expected to be there. He was in his mid-50s, silver streaks in his beard, tired knees from years of crouching beside playgrounds and theater seats. The invitation came in the mail, simple and unassuming. "Please join us." It was the National Educator Inspiration Awards, a televised event, hosted in a hall Jordan had once walked past, never thinking he'd belong inside. But that night, he was escorted to a front row seat. Cameras flashed. The host called 4 names: Levi, River, Noah. Theo and the room erupted. They didn't speak of fame or fortune. They spoke of a man who showed up when no one else did, of bottle feeds and power outages, of small hands held through court hearings and birthdays celebrated in rented kitchens, of lessons learned not from textbooks but from presence. Then, the final moment. Theo stepped forward and pulled out a folded document. "We'd like to announce the founding of the Rivers Foundation," he said, "an international nonprofit dedicated to keeping sibling groups together in foster care, with a special focus on LGBTQ+ youth. It's time we stop breaking what was born whole." The applause blurred in Jordan's ears. He couldn't move, could barely breathe. It wasn't the cameras. It wasn't the recognition. It was the realization that something he'd once done simply to stop 4 children from being torn apart had turned into a legacy that might stop thousands more from ever being split. As the boys know, the men stood beside him. Jordan wiped his eyes, then spoke the only truth that felt big enough for the moment. "I used to think I chose you," he whispered, "but I see it now. You chose me. You made me someone I never knew I could become." And maybe that's what family really is. Not a list of names on a certificate, but a series of choices made in love, repeated every single day, until the world can no longer deny their power. If you had the chance to choose your family, not the one you were born into, but the one who stayed, who would it be? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, follow Heart Story for more stories that remind us the family that saves you might be the one you create